Hey everybody, what's happening? I am Gregg Sussman, joined today by Jim Sonis of FanDuel, not to talk golf or DFS NFL, but this is the XFL.
It's week one, man. The XFL is back. We got 4 games on the docket this weekend. Some pretty fun players, I think, in the player pool, too. So, Greg, this could be terrible. We could give out some really bad picks today because we don't know what's going to happen, but it'll be kind of fun while it lasts. So, let's get this puppy cranking.
Let's break it down, man. We got a Saturday slate, a Sunday slate. You can play on FanDuel each and every week here of the XFL. Let's begin with a quarterback for Saturday slate. It's PJ Walker. I think the question that's on most XFL fans' mind, what team is PJ Walker on?
Yeah, PJ Walker is the starting quarterback over Connor Cook. He won the job coming out of training camp, and Connor Cook was the second overall pick in the skill player draft. So a little bit of a surprise here that PJ Walker winds up getting the nod, but he's really interesting. His head coach is June Jones. And if you don't remember June Jones runs himself a really fun offense. So I, in general, want to go at this team. And I think that PJ Walker is a great way to do so. We ran a 4.79 40 coming out of college. He went to Temple, pretty experienced coming out. At Temple, he did have a propensity to throw a good number of picks, but it seemed like that was because he was aggressive, chucking the ball downfield and seeing how that went. So I do like that for sure. It could make PJ Walker a little bit volatile, but I think there is a chance that he could run a bit because he did have that good 40 number at the combine. I think that they'll pass a lot under June Jones. And all those things, add up really well for me liking PJ Walker. So again, it's a bit of a gamble. He is $18. I think that Cardell Jones will probably be the most popular guy out in DC just because they're heavier favorites and Cardell Jones, the more known entity. But PJ Walker's on an offense I like more just because I expect him to pass a bit more and he could run a bit. So if we're looking at the Saturday only slate, PJ Walker is kind of my favorite guy right now.
PJ Walker beating out, like you said, the number 2 overall pick in the skill position player draft in Connor Cook, somebody who you'd think would have some success in the XFL. If Walker was able to beat him out, he makes a fine play here this weekend on the Saturday slate. Let's move over to the running back with someone I do know here, Jim, and that's Terrell Presley, former NFL running back. This week, he's in a good spot.
Yeah, the entire DC team in general is in a pretty good spot here because they are pretty heavily favored. So I do want to go at DC, but looking at Pep Hamilton, their head coach, I'm expecting them to be a little bit more run heavy. And with them being favored, I do think that it does make sense to go at the ground game here. And Terrell Presley shapes up to be the number 1 back on this team. The defenders are 5-1 to win the championship. They're facing Seattle. They're 12-1 to win the championship at FanDuel Sportsbook. And this game is in DC, so that does bode well for the ground game. And Terrell Presley led the AAF in rushing yards last year. Also got some work as a receiver. It wasn't a huge amount, but it was enough for him to be interesting there. So I do like that. And coming out of college, he was a 90th percentile Spark athlete, according to Player Profiler. So some good athleticism with Terrell Presley, as you mentioned, a former NFL guy. I would project him to lose some passing down work to Donnell Pumphrey, another former NFL guy for the Eagles. But I can live with that when the salary for Presley is so palatable at $18. If you think that Los Angeles will play well, even though Josh Johnson is in question for them this weekend, I think that Elijah Hood makes a lot of sense at $20 because he is, I think, more likely to be the every down back for his team. But you can save some money, drop down to Terrell Presley at $18, and still get yourself a back. I would expect to get a good amount of work. So Elijah Hood, I think, kind of the 1B on this slate, whereas I put Terrell Presley as the 1A.
Elijah Hood and Terrell Presley both in the mix here this week, but as big of a favorite as Washington is, they should be running the football, and hopefully they do for our sake. Let's continue on. Let's get to a wide receiver here, Jim. And Rashad Ross makes sense. I was saying Rashawn like the saxophone player of the Dave Matthews Band, but it's Rashad Ross. He's $15 here this week over in the XFL DFS on FanDuel. Why do you like the speedy Rashad Ross?
Yeah, I think at wide receiver / tight end on the Saturday only slate, I'm really interested in Sammy Coates. He is $20 and he pairs really well with PJ Walker if you want exposure to that Houston passing game. But I'm also interested in DC just because they do have Cardell Jones and I expect them to win that game. That leads me to Rashad Ross. He is $15, and Rashad Ross probably going to be popular because he was really good in the AAF, averaged 16.2 yards per catch. He had 7 touchdowns there, but I think that that's going to lead to a lot of buzz for him as well. But I think that's justified because Rashad Ross was really good. He had a good combine time coming out of college. That was a pretty long time ago because he is now 30 years old. But I still think that Rashad Ross is interesting. Now, if you want to get different within the same team, I think Malachi Dupree is interesting. He is $18 out of LSU. Played alongside DJ Chark in a pretty bad passing offense, which is why his numbers at LSU weren't that good. But then there's also DeAndre Tompkins. DeAndre Tompkins, $14. He missed practice Wednesday, which is why I didn't talk about him here, but you're at a 4.39 40 coming out of college at Penn State. So if he's good to go, if we get confirmation DeAndre Tompkins will be good to go, I would be very interested in him. But Malachi Dupree, expensive. DeAndre Tompkins banged up. I think it is okay then to go to Rashad Ross at $15. Again, if you can't afford Sammy Coates, all the way up at $20. Rashad Ross, productive in one of the offshoot leagues in the past. We know that he's got some speed, and he's got a good quarterback as well. So Rashad Ross has some imperfections due to the popularity, but still someone I'm very willing to use this weekend.
Rashad Ross's spark score, like you said, from the combine came a while ago now, but he's always had speed. We'll see if he can use that speed to DFS success here this weekend over in the XFL. And quick correction, Rashad Ross is the trumpet player for the Dave Matthews Band, not the saxophone player. Gotta get that right. Accurate here on the FanDuel Hurry Up. Let's move over to Sunday here, Jim, and that brings us now to another quarterback, and it's our guy. We talked about it before we started. It's Erin Murray, someone we always believed would be an NFL starter, or at least a backup. He was neither, and now he's a starter in the XFL. He's $18 at quarterback this week. You gotta like Erin Murray.
Yeah, Greg, I think we're both longtime Erin Murray truthers. The big reason I like Erin Murray, outside of what you mentioned as being a guy we had high expectations for coming out of college, is that he's paired with Mark Trestman, and Mark Trestman is like a legend in the CFL. He's won 3 different Grey Cups with 2 separate teams. He's missed the playoffs once in his entire CFL career, and the XFL has unique rules. And I think that bodes well for guys who have experience in the Canadian Football League and can adjust to different rules. Mark Trestman is that guy, which makes me like Tampa Bay in general, which leads me to like Erin Murray. He was really good at Georgia. He was a 5th-round pick to the NFL, over half a decade ago, so it's been a while, but he was drafted. I think that's certainly good. And Erin Murray, the no-doubt starter for this Tampa Bay team. He is in a good offense that I expect to be good. Tampa Bay, pretty interesting from a betting perspective. They have some of the shorter championship odds at FanDuel Sportsbook. So I want to buy into this team because of Mark Trestman. Erin Murray, just $18 allows me to do so for a pretty cheap price. So I think it makes sense to load up on him and potentially, as we'll talk about in just a second, get one of his pass catchers as well.
It's been too long since we've seen Erin Murray in action. That ends on Sunday. I am excited, but who's he going to throw it to? Who's going to be successful? I'll tell you that in just a few moments. Let's move on to the running back on the Sunday slate. That brings us to Tim Cook. What can you tell us about Cook?
Yeah, Tim Cook is playing in the same game as Erin Murray. We don't generally want to pair a quarterback with an opposing running back because the game script for them is kind of dependent on scoring touchdowns. And that's a tough look for Tim Cook, but he's very cheap. He is $17, whereas Christine Michael is $18 on the same slate. And Tim Cook is on a team that's just a slight underdog at home. So I do like Tim Cook as a result of that. And look at the depth chart behind Tim Cook. It's kind of not that great for New York, and I think that leads me to believe Tim Cook is going to be the main guy for this team. He had a 74th percentile spark score coming out according to Player Profile. I do like that. He's 242 pounds, so he's a bigger dude. But his backup ran a 4.75 40 coming out. So I do expect Tim Cook to potentially be the number 1 guy in this offense and possibly including some passing down work as well. I think if you're looking elsewhere on the slate, Cameron Artis-Payne is $19. I don't mind that. And again, I think that Christine Michael is interesting despite being on a team that I wouldn't expect to fare all that well. But if you want to save a little bit of money and get a guy who I think has a chance to have a really good role in his team, that guy's Tim Cook, just $17, and someone I am very willing to use despite the fact he's facing off with the quarterback I like most in the slate as well.
Yeah, it's a weird pairing, the running back from one team, the quarterback from another, but Tim Cook does seem worth it here this week in the XFL's debut on Sunday. So Cook, the big man, let's see if he can get in the end zone on Sunday. Finally, we move over on the wide receiver / tight end spot, Jim. And you mentioned pairing a player up with Erin Murray. And that's exactly what you're going to do. We bring about Nick Truesdale. What can you tell me about Truesdale?
Yeah, the fun thing about the XFL on FanDuel, Greg, is you don't have to use a tight end. So you could totally just push them to the side and never think about them again until August. Nick Truesdale is a tight end, and he was actually the first round pick for Tampa Bay. And I kind of want to use him. I'm not sure if this is just like masochistic or what, but I still want to use tight ends here in the XFL. And Truesdale is my favorite one. And I think because he is a tight end, we're getting a pretty big discount on him down at $14. But as mentioned, he was Tampa Bay's first round pick with Mark Trestman. And Truesdale hasn't always been a tight end. He came out as a wide receiver and ran a 4.5 40 at the combine. He has added some weight since then to transition to being a tight end, so I would not expect him to be a 4.5 guy anymore, but he got a lot of buzz during training camp for Tampa Bay, and I would not be shocked if Nick Truesdale winds up being the leading pass catcher on this team as a tight end. When you can get that on an offense we expect to be pretty good for just $14, I think you should take advantage. So there is some risk in Nick Truesdale, and again, you don't need to use a tight end in this format, but I'm still broadly interested in doing so despite all those factors. Nick Truesdale could be a matchup nightmare for opposing teams. This is a good game environment between Tampa Bay and New York, so I am fully okay going all in here, buying into Erin Murray, buying into Mark Trestman, and locking in Nick Truesdale, despite the fact we really don't have to in the XFL.
Let's buy into Truesdale, man. You sold me. I'm excited. You don't have to go with the wide receiver. You don't have to go with the tight end. You can do whatever you want. Truesdale's the guy. First round pick of Tampa Bay. Let's take advantage here this week and get all the Murray to Truesdale on Sunday. That's going to do it for us here on the FanDuel Hurry Up. I'm pumped for the XFL. Jim, let's do it.
Let's do it, Greg. We'll have a lot more information heading into next week. This week is going to be a little bit of a crapshoot, but hey, it'll be a fun crapshoot, so we'll see how it goes, and we'll have more data to give out when we get set for week 2 next week.
Now we're just looking at lines. Next week, we'll have actually stats. That's fun. All right, it should be a good time. For Jim Sadas, I'm Gregg Sussman. Join us back here tomorrow for another edition of the FanDuel Hurry Up.